Hello friends, I'm the GM Philosopher. Welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. Today I'm asking a very important philosophical question. Is Dungeons & Dragons inherently racist? I'm gonna break this to you softly. The answer is actually, essentially, yes. Dungeons & Dragons is at its core built on racial essentialism, but wait, don't panic. That doesn't mean it's doomed. It just means we need to talk about where it comes from and what we do with it now. What do you think? Drop a comment and let me know. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and tell you basically what I've come up with when I reduce it down philosophically. I'm also going to take a quick moment right here, a quick little break to tell you that I have a new free ebook available, redone with new content, 10-minute GM Mastery. Transform your games with a 10-minute read. Download that in the comments. It's free, and the reason I offer this is because I want to continue the mission of this channel, which is to empower game masters to run better games. So if that sounds like your mission too, download that. It's awesome. All right, let's get back to the video. D&D was born in the 1970s by white war gamers in a Eurocentric context, drawing heavily on Tolkien, pulp fantasy, and mythic archetypes. The result? A system that hard-coded race with biological traits and often moral alignments as well. When you open the monster manual and read that orcs are savage or that drow are inherently evil, you're not just reading fantasy. You're reading a blueprint that echoes colonial language, pseudoscience, and centuries of racial essentialism. In D&D, race often determines ability scores, magical aptitude, or even moral disposition. And when those rules are framed as natural, they teach something that could be even described as dangerous, that culture is biological, that morality is inherited, that destiny is dictated by birth. And that's not just bad storytelling, that's actually even bad philosophy. We need to be honest. D&D wasn't made in a vacuum. It's a product of its time. But that doesn't mean it was malicious. It means it was sort of unexamined. The original designers pulled from Tolkien's Elves and Orcs, Moorcock's Law versus Chaos, and real-world anthropology without always thinking about the implications. They weren't trying to make a racist game. They were trying to make mythic archetypes. But the line between myth and stereotype is sometimes thinner than it looks. To its credit, D&D has tried to evolve. 5th edition removed racial ability score penalties, newer settings like Eberron treated orcs as spiritual guardians, not mindless brutes, and some books now include disclaimers and tools for reimagined ancestry. But the deeper question isn't just, are the rules better now? I think a deeper question might be, what kind of stories do we want to use D&D to tell moving forward? Are we leaning on race as a shortcut for culture, for morality, for conflict? Or are we creating worlds where people are defined by choices instead of bloodlines? If you're a GM, you get to hold a pen, or at least part of the pen. You decide to a big extent what race means in your world. You can redefine ancestry, separate culture from biology, let orc mean something new, and you can ask who told this story first and who was left out. Now, I believe that many game masters in our GM philosophy community here do exactly this. I believe there are many game masters who do not jump immediately to the stereotypes when it comes to characters. I've seen many game masters run characters that sort of broke away from what you might call the stereotype of their race and create something totally different. Non-chaotic tieflings, cultured orcs, elves who instead of being refined and noble sometimes fall on the line of savagery. What I'm saying is I've seen a lot of game masters use mixed ancestries, build cultures around geography, history, language, and basically throw a different sort of filter on the creation of these things than what might have at one time been just blood dictates what you are. In other words, I see a lot more free form with the way game masters tend to run their games today. And I think it's not only inventive and artistic, I think it helps to get away from some of the stereotypes that could be maybe labeled as racist. And I think that a lot of game masters today let morality emerge from action instead of a predetermined alignment that is just based on race. Or as they call it now in 5e, species, but you get what I'm saying. So when we come back to the question, is D&D inherently racist? Well, yes, in the sense that its foundations were built on sort of a flawed model of race, in the sense that you would say race dictates outcome in 100% of situations, well then, yes, we could pretty safely label D&D as at least racist at its foundations to a sort of essentialist extent. But here's the truth also, and this is, I think, a truth that a lot of people really want to look at when they're kind of claiming that being that D&D is racist. Every system is a product of its time. What matters is how we as game masters run our games and how we use some of these stats, some of this suggested culture and lore. There's a point to where having the cultural backdrop for D&D that is provided, even if it's maybe a bit racist at an essential level, gives us sort of a foundation that we can then use to inject new life and to kind of pull from and to create those exceptions to the rule that stand out to actually bring D&D out of what you might call an umbrella of racist sort of ideals and bring it into the realm of solution to a racist sort of umbrella of systems, to then say, look, we're using this system to tell stories that are literally teaching the opposite of some of these racist essentialist ideologies. We're creating stories that are showing you that any race could be good or evil, that a creature is not at all necessarily 100% a product of its culture, of its species. Good and evil for sentient creatures is something that at some point is chosen on an individual level, perhaps influenced by culture, but also influenced by the greater world, by the gods, by their adventures, by their life experiences. These are deeper stories. I also really believe this. You don't fix a system like Dungeons & Dragons with an angry tweet or a boycott. I really believe that Dungeons & Dragons is an amazing system. I love to play Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, I'm probably less angry about some of the racial stereotypes than others because I know how the world works. I know that no matter how much we like to say we're enlightened humans, there is some element where we fall back sometimes on racial stereotypes. We can't get away from that. I'm not going to deny that, and I don't think anyone would deny that. There's a point to where racism is an everyday part of life for humans that we are constantly kind of working on. And while our ideals today, like the average person, are probably, like, I might say, way more ethical and more moral than they were 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago, it's also true that that cluster of thoughts, cluster of philosophical kind of like pattern thinking that goes on in the racism category is still a big deal today. I don't think anyone's going to deny that that's true. I also think, and this might be a controversial thought, but I don't care. I also think that there's a real danger in getting too paranoid of racism, because if we get too paranoid, we try to remove any racist backing information of any kind from the picture, we will erase the individuality of culture. And the individuality of culture is one of the things that makes Dungeons and Dragons so beautiful. There are so many fantasy cultures to draw inspiration from. And if you just wash all that away with a blanket, uniform, paragon type character output, and you ignore the background of the difference of the cultures, that also takes away from the game, and I believe is inherently racist as well. Because what could be more racist than erasing an entire culture simply based on the fact that that culture is different than another one? Regardless of whether the culture was, today considered morally right or wrong or good or evil or lawful or chaotic, the point stands that erasing it removes a part of the storytelling potential. And in Dungeons and Dragons, storytelling is a crucial part of what we're doing. I think that the best way to use Dungeons and Dragons is to play it, wanting to tell a story. And if racism is a natural part of life, it's probably going to find its way into our stories, just like love triangles do, and just like fear and courage and chaos and trying to deal with things larger than ourselves. There are many elements of real life that will make it into our games, and race is one of them. We can play with intention. We can run games with intention. We can run games with imagination, and we can challenge stereotypes at our table with our players. And I actually believe we should do this, not just when it comes to race. I also think that when it comes to gender roles, we can do this. I think that when it comes to questions about morality in a broader sense, questions about killing, about life and death, about stealing versus like needing, and the kind of the whole Robin Hood type thing, like rob from the rich to give to the poor, is kind of a moral question. There are a lot of moral questions we can explore in D&D, and I think we should be exploring them. And I believe that being too afraid of racism to play Dungeons and Dragons is also a problem. I think that we should appreciate the fact that racism is a real thing. We should not downplay it. And when we create amazing games, actually, no matter what system you're using, to be honest, I'm just talking about Dungeons and Dragons because that was like the original topic of the video. But I think that we can take those things and we can challenge them. We can challenge with new ideas. We can challenge with new ways of thinking. We can challenge those, what we might call established, but perhaps negative stereotypes, and flip them around. I think this is good storytelling, but I also think it's a good experience for any table of players. I truly believe this. And that's one of the transformative abilities, powers of Dungeons and Dragons. So there's my thought process, my philosophy, my basically essential breakdown of the question, is Dungeons and Dragons racist? Let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to hear it. I'm the GM Philosopher. I'll see you awesome people on the next one.